Again by M. Rubio. Chapter 1. Once more. Sat down at same shade under the same tree as every day during a long time. There she was again. As ever, Dad had asked her not to disturb the hotel guests. This, in reality, wasn't difficult, as they used to come and go without noticing her presence, quite as if she didn't exist. But she ever saw it as normal, never becoming sad about. The majority of the guests seemed to be very ever angry, too serious, and she, in contrary, was a very happy child. Then it wasn't necessary she to have contact with them. Sometimes she'd had the opportunity to play with other children. For sure, taking care not to disturb the parents, as Dad ever used to ask. These were fun days, and she used to talk a lot with them, playing hide and seek, enjoying a lot of the nature, as they used to play outside. Those children had something new to teach her. She ever was asking about the schools, about their teachers, and about anything new that they had learned. She wasn't going to school, even being 10 years old. Dad ever told her that school was too far from there and that he and Mom could teach her everything she needed to know. Chapter 2. The School. Not ever was like this. She could remember a few days at school. Her teacher was a pretty blue-eyed blonde woman, also named Sophie. She ever was speaking softly, almost whispering. Very polite, she used to take care of the children with much love, as being their guardian angel. Every morning, Mom combed Sophie's golden wavy hair before going to school. They were magic moments when Mom was happily taking care of her. School wasn't far from home. Then they both used to walk a flowery path in the middle of a field full of trees. Sophie was ever happy, walking, sometimes jumping, observing the birds on the trees, picking flowers on the way to hand to her teacher. She used to kindly receive the flowers and put them in a jar. In the course of time, Sophie noticed that happiness on receiving them was turning to an unexpected emotion that started making her to cry. Sophie thought, when this started to happen, that was too much happiness, too much kindness, too much emotion, and continued taking the flowers, even when the tears began to resemble those of sadness. Mom and Dad also started to seem worried, laughing less day by day, ever by her side, asking her not to be far from them, even for a moment. Unknown people arrive in the city, strangers trying to talk to her and the other children, asking about their way of life until they started to frequently interrupt the classes. Sophie wasn't understanding what was happening, but Mom and Dad told her not to worry about. Chapter 3. Moving to the hotel. Life was unexpectedly changing. To live in a hotel seemed too funny. Anyway, a lot of orientations had been received from Dad and Mom. They would be responsible for the cleaning, cooking, all hotel keeping, and also for planting. There were a lot of fruit trees, and all vegetables to be eaten up by the hotel guests should be produced there. Moving wasn't much difficult, as only clothes and most important things, as documents, should be taken along. Mom, for sure, had taken her jewels along with family jewels, and Sophie ever loved. Sometimes Mom was looking them, handling them, and explaining Sophie their origins. The three-strand pearl necklace was originally from grandmother. It was Mom's wedding gift. There were also a lot of gold rings, bracelets, and men and women watches. Anyway, the only that ever made her eyes shine was that old pocket watch. Sophie ever had the sensation to see her grandfather when looking at. Just one doll was taken along with, but Sophie's sadness for leaving the other toys was quickly forgotten, as she'd a lot of new things to do there. During some months, they'd been there all alone, and Dad constructed a tree house where she was quite all day long playing with the wooden toys made by himself. Also, a tree swing was made to her, near to the house. Everything was perfect. Chapter 4. First Guests. They arrived all together. There were 5 families and just 4 rooms. Sophie thought something should be wrong, but her parents' organization quite made a kind of magic, as the day after all of them looked to be very much happy. Now, 3 new friends were there, playing with her quite all day long. Aaron was the youngest of them, just 4 years old. His sister Elsa was 8 and used to take care of him every moment. Jessica was their cousin and was 6 years old. All of them were very kind, and Sophie loved their company. For sure, all her toys were shared, including the tree house and the tree swing. Sophie can't remember how long they'd been there, just that had been very happy days. Each afternoon, all the families used to meet at the drawing room. On one side, parents used to take some hours talking about things that children couldn't hear. Usually, were very serious conversations. At the meantime, older children were teaching the younger ones maths, language, geography, history. It seemed a little school, and Sophie was ever pleased to attend these classes. In the course of time, and increasing worry could be observed during adults' meetings. Anyway, nothing should interfere children's classes, nor their happy time playing. First family to go away was Aaron and Elsa one. Sophie was much sad to see her friends leave in the hotel, and her sadness increased until the last family to go. No family replaced those ones during a long time. Dad was looking more and more serious, more and more worried, and Sophie thought that he should be also sad due not to have any friend to meet and talk every afternoon. Mom told Sophie not to worry about that everything would be fine. Chapter 5. The Fever. The solitude of the first days without her friends was hardly replaced by her everyday activities. To play during all day long, continuing classes every afternoon, made her don't think a lot about them until the day when he'd arrived. He was a big black dog, and Dad told her that he should be lost from his family. Sophie immediately gave him something to eat, as he was looking hungry, and also carefully washed him. It was quite magical when Sophie tried the name Max and he attended. No doubt, his name was Max. Now, with her new four-legged friend, every moment by her side, loneliness had been completely forgotten. Dad had constructed an access ramp for him to go up to the tree house. There, they were playing during hours together. Also, when she was playing on the tree swing, he was just sit down in front of her, taking care of each movement, taking care of her. Sometimes she just was under the apple tree, studying a little, enjoying the shadow, and Max has been ever by her side. During the classes, he was ever paying attention, looking like to be also learning. Some time has passed. Sophie didn't know how long, until she started to feel herself sick. It was an unspeakable high fever. She started to feel very uncomfortable, a pain in quite all her body. In reality, she couldn't remember how had arrived at the hospital. Probably was a consequence of the high fever, but she was there, feeling that pain, being observed by Max. Doctors and nurses taking care of her and of some more people every moment. She was feeling thirsty all the time, and the nurse constantly was giving her some magic water that quenched her thirst, and little by little was making her feel better. When Dad and Mom arrived, she was already feeling better, and they all, together, including Max, started the way back home. Chapter 6. The Way Back. Suddenly, she was already at home. She just could remember some flashes from the way back. Unknown people looking so sad and scared, seeming to ask for help. Somewhere, some mud, no light to show the way, and Dad and Mom telling her not to worry. Here and there, between a nap and another, she was looking for Meg's eyes, and there they were, ever she needed them. Her friend hadn't let her alone at the hospital, nor at the way back home. During one of these flashes, she had the sensation to see her teacher. She was looking so sad, as during the last days at school. Now she was giving hand to some children, like taking care of them kindly, as she used to do in those days at school. During another flash, she had the sensation of seeing her friends Aaron and Elsa. It was amazing because they were looking so sad. They were crying, and Sophie couldn't see their parents near to them. An immense sadness came over her heart. She couldn't understand what was happening, but Dad and Mom, again, told her not to worry. She'd no idea of how long was the way back, of how long did it take, on how many times she woke up and fell asleep again. She'd only been sure that Dad, Mom, and Max were always long together with her. Sophie also didn't know how long she was asleep after arriving home. Probably a long time, as she was feeling so tired, and now this sensation had disappeared. Finally at home. Chapter 7. Amazing. Sophie woke up early in the morning, and what she saw was really amazing. The hotel seemed old and abandoned. It was looking as if it had been a long time since they go to the hospital. Dad and Mom were working a lot to have everything tidy again. Anyway, Sophie used to see them working. This time had the sensation that they were making a bigger effort on everything they were doing. They asked her to play outside and not to disturb the guests. What guests? Sophie thought they should come soon, and stayed a long time playing with Max, sat down under the apple tree, waiting them to arrive. Looking around, she thought that Dad would have a lot of work next days. The vegetable garden was completely invaded by weeds. Also, the entrance door and some furniture should be repaired. The tree house probably would be cleaned and repaired later on. Next morning, Sophie was surprised by a complete team of maintenance and cleaning, doing an excellent work inside and also outside. They were weirdly dressed as being workers from a big company, and she tried not to disturb their work, being all day long playing outside with Max. Sophie thought that the faster they could finish the cleaning and maintenance of the hotel and the garden, the faster her tree house would be also ready. And so it was. Chapter 8. The New Orders. Dad and Mom explained to her that the hotel had already new owners, but that she would not worry about, as nothing would change their life. Sophie became pleased with the news, as their parents lately were very much happy, laughing a lot, playing a lot with herself and Max. For sure, they did their work also, helping a lot in cleaning and maintenance activities. However, their own life hadn't been affected. They were also a family of 3 people: the father, the mother, and a little boy named Eli. He was 8 years old. The parents used to act as if she didn't exist, and Sophie tried, as Dad and Mom had asked, never disturb them. But Eli had quickly become her and Max's friend. Eli used to go every morning to school, so she asked Dad to have her home classes during the morning, instead during the afternoons, as until now, to have time to play with Eli when he was back from school. For sure, she didn't understand why Dad told her to continue classes at home. She'd like to go to school, maybe to meet her old friends and teacher. But Dad told her not to worry about. Then, every afternoon, they used to play in the tree house, at the tree swing, playing hide and seek, the 3 of them, Eli, Sophie, and Max. When raining, they used to take refuge in the tree house, and during long time they were playing with her wooden toys made by Dad. Sometimes the rain suddenly invaded their refuge, but they'd never get angry about. On the contrary, they used to fill it fun, too fun, and also to sing a lot of songs. Chapter 9. The Couple. Sophie was ever trying not to disturb the guests, as asked every day by Dad and Mom. As quite all of them used to act as if she didn't exist, it was much easier. She also used to act as if they also didn't exist. Just playing and talking a lot with Eli and Max was sufficient. Sometimes other children joined them, but they never stayed long, until the day when that couple had arrived. Sophie saw something different in them. It was funny to see them arriving, shrouded in sunlight. She needed to close and open her eyes twice to define them. Eli was still at school, and Sophie had already had her classes when the woman approached her and tried to talk. Sophie got a shock. During so much time, the only adults approaching and talking to her had been just Dad and Mom. During 2 hours' time, where was Sophie? That woman also, trying to talk to her. It was weird and uncomfortable, as she didn't want to answer. Looking as a kind and good woman, probably she would answer if she didn't feel afraid to disturb her. She was an adult. Dad told not to disturb them. Anyway, she tried to act as if that woman wasn't there. She would only talk to that woman if that authorized it. As soon as Eli had arrived, Sophie commented to him about that amazing woman and about what had happened during the morning. Eli explained to her that they weren't exactly guests. His parents had invited them to come to the hotel due to a kind of strange events. They were experts on something that she didn't understand very well, and she became more peaceful about. No reason to worry. Chapter 10 Invasion. Just when that couple was going away, something very much amazing happened. Dad told her not to leave the house until she could be back. Then she remained, together with Max, looking through the window. A crowd was following them, so many persons that Sophie couldn't count them. The first ones she couldn't identify very well, as they were involved by a funny light. Others, just normal ones, looking so tired. Sophie thought they were walking a long time. That would be the reason to be so tired. And all of them were following the couple. Then a lot of muddy dirt people arrived and stayed outside during a long time. It was scary. In the multitude, Sophie could identify some of those unknown people that a long time ago had arrived the city, trying to talk to her and to the other children, asking about their way of life, sometimes interrupting the classes. Those people seemed like bad ones, and all of them had been looking at the window where Sophie was, as if looking for her. Probably they should be the reason Eli's parents asked the couple help. Certainly, this was the so strange event mentioned by them. The night came, and Dad wasn't still back, nor Mum. Chapter 11 The day after. Sophie was still afraid of those people camped outside. From time to time, some of them started to walk and disappeared on the way, until she couldn't see anybody else outside. She thought to go out, to play a little with Max, and to play and talk with Eli. But she'd promised Dad not to leave the house, and continued there, waiting. It was raining a lot when Eli came back from school. She could hear the storm with the strong lightnings, so no doubt a good opportunity to play inside the house, and Eli gave her the news. His parents had decided to send him to an intern school. Something about not to make up stories. Nothing that Sophie could understand. Maybe Eli was doing it without her to know, because he'd never lied to her. They talked during hours, and she helped him to prepare the suitcase. It was a Catholic school, far from there, and she was much sad thinking about when they could see each other again. In the meantime, it stopped raining, but Sophie was still waiting Dad, and they decided to play a little with Max in the dining room. Definitely, this hasn't been a good idea, as it finished with a broken dish. This had been the first time that Sophie had broken something, and she became much ashamed too. As Eli was supposed to travel early in the morning, they decided to sleep. Sophie was sad, worried about that, but she wasn't alone. Max was there. Chapter 12. How long? During a long time, she couldn't know how much, Sophie had stayed at home, never leaving to play, trying not to disturb the guests, nor Eli's parents. Max has been ever by her side, but Dad was taking too long to be back, and when Mary arrived to stay there some days, Sophie thought that probably Dad could consider better her to play outside and not to break anything in the house. Mary was 12 years old, and she led Sophie astonished about her modernism and elegance. Being a bit older, she didn't like to play hide and seek. She told Sophie something of to be afraid of this kind of playing. Then they'd taken many hours just talking in the tree house. The wooden toys caught her attention. She took a long time observing, while Sophie was playing. During the conversation, Mary explained Sophie that probably she'd been too much time away from school, as a lot of new things were now being studied. Anyway, what made Sophie pay more attention was about history. She thought that was incredible that too much things had happened in a so short time. Unbelievable to think that a war has happened and finished while she and her parents were at the hotel. Probably this was the reason for them to move from the city, for them to stay there so long. She'd explained to Mary that Dad would return soon, and probably he would teach new historical facts when returning, as he would have the opportunity to know them. Chapter 13. Knowledge Changes. Mary went away, giving her a hug. But the sensation Sophie had was that she'd given her more than this. Now she already was playing outside every day together with Max, trying not to disturb the guests nor Eli's parents. But something inside herself had changed after Mary's stay. To know about so many things that had been happening while they'd been at the hotel had given her an inexplicable feeling. She started trying to remember what had occurred in the past and talking about with Max some flashes of forgotten events were slowly coming. Remembering that day when her teacher has hidden her in the closet, telling not to be afraid and advising her to run directly to home when those men had gone away, telling Dad and Mom what had happened at school, made her to remember the fear. A kind of fear that no 10 years old child should never feel. The memories were making her to exult, and she was explaining Max aloud how difficult was to be sure that nobody was already there to lift the closet. How tired she was when arrived home, breathless to speak, trying to tell Dad and Mum what had happened at school. She was crying a lot, and Dad and Mum were telling her not to worry. Immediately they ran away. Moving wasn't much difficult, as only clothes and most important things, as documents, should be taken alone. Mum for sure had taken all her jewels about with. Now Sophie could remember how wicked she was when they arrived at the hotel. To walk until there was very, very tiring. Where would Dad be now? She was anxious to talk about her memories with him. Chapter 14. Is Eli really back? As Dad and Mum were taking long to be back, Sophie started to sleep a lot, ever with her friend Max by her side, until the day she perceived a different joy in the house. Eli's parents were happily talking, cleaning everything. The mother was singing while cooking, and Sophie could understand that Eli was returning home. A huge emotion took over her heart. She'd chosen her best dress, combed her hair, and went out with Max to wait Eli's arrival. Did not take too long to arrive one of those modern cars. A good-looking blond man was driving it, and Sophie continued waiting. It was funny to see Eli's parents' happiness receiving that man. It wasn't usual to receive a guest this way. She continued to wait, and Max continued by her side. Some time later, that man was back and started to talk to her. Max jumped as if knowing him, and she was afraid this should disturb him. Then the man asked her if she wasn't recognizing him, that he was Eli. Eli? How could he be Eli? During some time, she stood still, just hearing Eli's news. Studying him and hearing his way to talk, she understood that yes, he was Eli. For sure, he was too different, and she couldn't know how. As in the past, they had stayed much hours talking in the tree house. Chapter 15. The Coming Days. Next days, Eli was in the tree house every afternoon to talk during hours. Sophie told him about Mary, about her fashion and knowledge, the new events in the history she'd explained. She commented Eli about the war and how it had affected all the world while they were safe at the hotel. While she was speaking, Eli just was paying close attention. He never interrupted her. He was a wonderful friend, and Sophie was very much happy to have him again near to her. She also told him about Dad, the way he went away, telling her to stay in the house. how she obeyed him, and during a long time stayed there until Mary arrived. Max also was ever there, hearing Eli's and Sophie's reasoning. Day by day, those conversations were doing Sophie to remember forgotten things. Sometimes the memories were happy, and other they filled her heart with sadness. One day, she started to weep bitterly, remembering how her dad and mom had been dragged by those muddy dirt people outside the house. Would this mean that they would never be back? That she would never see them anymore? She'd cried during hours. Eli and Max just could be there by her side, trying to comfort her without success. Chapter 16. Again. While the memories were returning, she started to see those people involved in a funny light outside the house. Eli told her not to worry, that those people maybe could help her to find her dad and mom. She got hopeful and tried to be calm. The day after, that couple was there again. Sophie thought, very, very strange, they to be so old. Continuing to talk every afternoon, her memories were returning, one by one, and she started to feel that fever again. It was some inexplicable high fever. Once again, she started to feel very uncomfortable, a pain in quite all her body. Eli and Max were by her side, trying her to feel better, but she was feeling worse and worse. Sophie was just wishing Dad and Mom to be there to take care of her. Suddenly, she was in the hospital. Doctors and nurses taking care of her every moment. The same constant thirsty, and the nurse giving her that magic water. Max was there by her side, maybe waiting her to be better for both to play together. Now the nurse was talking to her, telling about a school where Sophie could go to learn a lot. After some days, already feeling better, she was waiting Dad and Mom to arrive with the hope they could retake the way back home again.